G'day Dons fans and welcome back to Don the Stat. Last week probably played out how most people expected, a 64-point loss against the back-to-back reigning premiers. Our young group got tested against the best in the business. Now the challenge shifts again. This week it's a trip north to take on the Giants at ENGIE Stadium. 14th on the ladder with a 3-5 record, we take on a team with wins only against North Melbourne and Richmond to show for their last 7 weeks. I'm Jonathan Walsh and joining me as always is my co-host Ed Hume. Humey, between Whiteboard Gate, Caddy Gate, Saad Gate, it's never really a dull moment being a Dons fan, mate. How are you travelling?
Hey there, Jono. Yeah, it certainly has been another week of Essendon news, whether it's self-inflicted or otherwise. But look, the things I do for our listeners, it's not easy podcasting from your garage on the coldest day of the year so far, but I will soldier on. As always, I'm excited to get into tonight's show. As always, there are things to dislike and things to like about the Bombers on a weekly basis. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm pretty good, thank you, mate. I'm certainly buoyed by my other football team making their way through to the Champions League final during the week. I'm a little bit tired for having to be up at 5 a.m. to watch that, but yeah, it's nice that one of my two football loves are getting a few wins on the board. But yeah, I've certainly got my eye on the Giants this week. And yeah, it's tough as it is seeing these losses mount up. What is enjoyable is seeing our young blokes and how they equip themselves, and I'm looking forward to seeing how they go against the Giants.
Yeah, me too. And you mentioned your other football team, or my other football team is teasing me with just jumping out of relegation, and I'm sure they'll find a way to disappoint me by the end of the season. But we will get on to the usual programming and start by thanking those who signed up to the Patreon, which is Jay Williams for this week. So thanks for joining us, Jay. Hopefully everyone on the Patreon appreciated the video you put out, Jono, highlighting some of the things you noticed from the Brisbane game. I think you've done a pretty good job highlighting some of the reasons why the game fell apart as it did.
Yeah, look, I think we'll get to the review shortly. Well, we definitely will. It's on the running sheet. But yeah, there were some things in how we set up at centre bounce that stood out to me. And partly set up, but I think more so execution that I wanted to walk through and yeah, was able to grab some clips of that and share it. And then, yeah, there were a few of the whiteboard comments, which I know we'll touch on too, that I think certainly hit the mark. And there are a couple of examples in the game where those comments turned out to be pretty accurate. So again, I think for balance of our listeners, I showed some good, some bad and some ugly. And yeah, I think that was all there for everyone to see on the weekend.
Yeah, and absolutely. Well, look, before we do get further into tonight's review, please allow us to indulge ourselves for a bit as we have actually reached the 100th match preview for Don the Stat since we started the week before the first game of 2022. Now, those early episodes were lost to time on Twitter Spaces, and thank God too, because they were painful. But you and I have really developed into having a nice groove. It's been an absolute pleasure doing this show with you for the past 99 match previews and the first thoughts and the season previews and the post-season stuff and the trade stuff and the Patreon Q&As. It's been well more than 100 episodes of Don the Stat and, of course, the 2 massive countdowns we managed to do. But this is our 100th game. We're running through the banner. I'm sure the club has organised something and he's hoping they'll be able to do us a solid and get us a win to celebrate this weekend.
Yeah, we've come a long way, mate, haven't we? Yeah, like you, I'm glad those early episodes, not that I've ever listened to a single one of them back, but I'm glad they have disappeared into the void forever. But yeah, I do have to say that despite the ups and downs, I still thoroughly enjoy every minute talking footy with you. This has been one of the greatest things I've ever done and really glad that you joined me for the ride. And yeah, I think I guess the wins or milestones in terms of the podcast along the way have been incredible and surpassed expectations. I think we got excited when we got to 100 listeners and then 1,000 and we've gone well beyond that every week now. But yeah, we've had a couple of stints at number 1 in the football charts on Apple Podcasts as well, which has been nice. But I think the best thing, and we say it a lot, but we say it because it's true, is the community that has got around us, and that's been the best part of the journey. I was saying to Rick the other day, one of my favourite moments since starting the podcast was a photo went around on Twitter after we beat the Pies in 2024, and it was Craig, Rob, and Paddy celebrating that win together, who were 3 guys who I guess joined the community and met through that way. So sort of to know that you've had an impact in bringing people together and guys who might have otherwise watched the game separately got to share that win together, I think is what Don the Stat has very quickly become all about. And I think I enjoy that part of it the most now.
Absolutely. Obviously the pre-game meetups and the friendships that we've built along the way. Again, a lot of people we've met through doing this show have become great friends and people you want to talk to and spend time with that not connected to footy as well. So that's just been a nice, happy bonus from doing the show. And yeah, it'd be nice if the football team was performing better and maybe we got on to our 100th win a couple of years earlier or 100th game a couple of years earlier because we'd been playing in all these finals. But it's still been an absolute pleasure to do this show, to talk about our beloved Bombers and, really try and dig deep and go beyond sort of the surface level takes that we often see in other mainstream sources.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing that keeps me going, mate, is the questions or emails and feedback that we get from people who just want to say thank you that we've helped them understand the game better, the club better, or how the game's played better, or just kept them engaged with the club when other parts of the media, I guess mainstream media, have let them down. So yeah, that's nice. And for me, it's certainly only increased my love and passion for the club. I feel like it's brought me closer to the club and what we're doing. And yeah, I think I just want to thank you to you and everyone who's helped us along the way. And I won't individualize here because there's too many to thank, but I think I hope that we've done a good job of sharing our gratitude with those people along the way. But to everyone who's listened and shared and engaged, whether you've been here since the start or you jumped on more recently, but yeah, really, really grateful that you've been a part of it. But yeah, should we get on, mate, and look into the Brisbane game and review it?
Yeah, well, we've been going on a while about ourselves because I guess it's hard to talk about the game that happened on the weekend. I think just sort of coming into the show tonight, it sort of occurred to me, and this might be the parent or teacher in me, but I've got I'm not angry, I'm disappointed a way in which I'm looking at this game. Because the first feature of the game is that we were playing the dual reigning premiers, and we were the younger side of the round going into that game. And the margin that the game ended up being what I thought was a pretty fair reflection of the current gap between the two sides. But from the other angle, there was too many players out there, particularly senior players who weren't prepared to work hard enough to challenge and try to make up for the distance between the two clubs. I don't ever thought going into the game we could have matched Brisbane for the entirety of it. I felt like there would be, a 10, 15-minute patch in the game where they blew us apart, which they've done to a lot of other sides and a lot of better sides than us. But it was just so disappointing to have too many players down and against a team like Brisbane, they make you pay. And we saw that in multiple ways on the weekend.
Yeah, I think that's the way the game should be taken, mate. I think Peter Wright and Sam Durham as senior players, both get a big tick. I thought Peter Wright was our best player on the ground and Sam was close there too and in the leadership group. So I think a big pass mark for both of those. But there weren't too many other in that sort of 25, 26-year-old and up group that you would put in that category. But I think the thing that I did like was Sullivan Roby took a big step. I think, was it Dunkley that he pushed aside to kick that goal? And, certainly it was a senior Brisbane body that he was able to move past. And, we saw him in the centre bounce for the first time as well. Thought Archie Roberts was good again. Dyson Sharp played his first game as a pure mid and didn't look like he was, uncomfortable at any stage. I thought Caddy played his best game of his career, just didn't quite finish. Farrow, I made the comment in our chat that I don't reckon he needs to work to wear deodorant because I don't think he sweats. I was actually talking to a friend of the show, Robert Shaw, during the week, and I said to him, not a comment that I make lightly. I think sure, most people know I'm not sort of one to make sensationalist comments, but he's probably the most composed 18-year-old I've seen in my time following Essendon, which unfortunately for me goes back a long way now. But I thought he was great. And then I thought El-Hawli was our best defender in terms of one-on-one up against a good opponent and working hard to beat him. I thought he was great again. So I think as the weeks go by, we're starting to see more and more evidence of why we made the decision at the end of 2023 to effectively go into a new direction in terms of our list strategy, invest in the draft and invest in young talent, start to move past senior players that were, sort of consistently showing that or I guess inconsistently is the right word, that they're unable to perform against the best teams week in, week out. And yeah, we let them jump us early, didn't we? There was 2 goals before, anyone got comfortable in their seat, and then 4 more in a row not long after that. 3 of those were from, pretty poor turnovers, and the game was over 2/3 of the way through the first quarter. And that's when you need your senior players to come to the fore. We didn't have that, but at the very least, we take out of the game that these young blokes are starting to look okay.
Yeah, you touched on it there in terms of that first quarter. And I think across the game, it was a game where we were beaten in multiple ways, in multiple parts of the ground. But it felt like in the first half that we were really struggling to exit from their defensive 50. And a lot of their scores were coming from when we were trying to get out of the 50. We were trying to go fast, trying to break through the Brisbane zone. And we just kept making mistakes because eventually we would turn the ball over in really dangerous positions. And a team like Brisbane is going to make you pay. So we gave up 32 points in front half turnovers in that first half of the game. A lot of times we were giving the ball back right outside 50. When you give the ball back in that part of the ground, they're absolutely going to hurt you. And essentially it was the difference between the two sides in the first half, their ability to make us cough the ball up and in a dangerous spot and take advantage of it.
Yep. Yeah, some real gimme goals, weren't there? There was McGrath, coughed up a handball, and, again, Whiteboard mentioned that as being a weakness of his, and there were a couple of examples in this game. Like I'm a big admirer of Andy McGrath and his ability to keep working and putting in on game day. I think one-on-one as a small defender, he's among the best in the competition, but he does have those moments under pressure where he coughs the ball up a little bit too easily. And I think in those moments, even if he just takes a tackle and gets done holding the ball, at least we give ourselves a chance to set up behind and get some numbers back. And then there was it Roby and Dersma who sort of both went for the same ball and spilled it. If it's a 4-goal game at halftime, and given we kicked 4-8 for the half, you'd probably be okay with a 3 to 4 goal result against Brisbane at halftime. But instead, it was 33 points at halftime, and then they come out the blocks. They kick 3-1 in 5 minutes to start the second half. 2 of those from centre bounces, and then before you know it, it's a pretty ugly game on the scoreboard.
Yeah, absolutely, and you're right. The scores from centre bounce were that story from second half. You pointed out a few of our poor centre bounce defensive efforts or positioning in your video, and in my obsession of going back and watching every centre bounce, it certainly wasn't pretty watching in that second half, especially as I could see it go straight down their goal and back. And then there were a couple of times where they kicked 2 goals, or I think at least once where they kicked consecutive goals from the centre bounce. And overall, in that second half, they scored 39 points from centre bounce. Combined with the 1 goal from centre bounce they kicked in the first quarter, that 45 points is the highest that any team has kicked from centre bounce. That the Bulldogs put on 45 points against the Dockers back in 2024. From the previous week, we certainly had a different look with our midfield. No Parrish or Sardis, McGrath being sent back. And then in that second half, when Brisbane really did the damage, Caldwell was off with his ankle injury probably about halfway through that third quarter. So we essentially only used 4 main midfielders for the day in Caldwell, Durham, Sharp and Merritt. Roby got a bit of a taste when Caldwell went down. I'm not sure if he would have had a go if Caldwell had stayed fit for the whole game. We talked in previous years about relying on too few players in there and the players getting tired by the end of the game. Do you think we saw that on Saturday, or were there other issues at play that saw the Lions score so easily from centre bounce?
No, I think there were largely other issues at play, mate. I mean, you can forgive probably Sharp and Roby for maybe fatiguing a little bit, given it was their first real taste, and what a way to have it against what's probably the best midfield in the comp now, I think. But I suspect after what happened on Anzac Day, where we made a lot of positional changes, and I think we have to accept that they were likely tactical moves. I don't think any coaching group moves the magnets just for the sake of it, not to start a game. Maybe, once you're getting late in a game that you're going to lose. But yeah, I think ultimately it's just not a group who is ready to expand the way that we're trying to play. And I think we probably made a decision just to strip things back and simplify things. And I think, that Anzac Day game was probably just a sign that our group isn't maybe as advanced as we'd hoped that they might have been, and weren't able to take on things we might have liked following a couple of good wins. So I think that makes sense. I noticed we went to a bit more of a traditional centre bounce setup. Spoken in previous episodes that we've gone with a bit of a triangle shape, sort of having almost 2 players in defensive spots to sort of just protect our situation, given that we don't have a dominant ruckman. And that worked well against Melbourne and to a lesser extent against the Suns. But instead, we went to a single sweeper role. Mind you, actually, it was also interesting to see Brisbane adjust their tactics when Blackiston was in the ruck. So Peter Wright typically tries to compete, keep the ball close with his hit-outs. Blackiston, because of his leap, is able to get over the top and knock the ball forward or outside the sort of inner ring of midfielders. So they set back, preempting that, which was interesting. It's the first time I've seen a real different look from an opposition because of Blackiston in the ruck. Yeah, it was Zach Merritt who was in that sweeper role a lot, and that just didn't work. He got sucked in too close to the contest, either pushed under or drawn in himself to try and win the footy. and then we lost shape. And I thought Durham played it a lot better because of his size and because of his ability to be quite explosive. He's able to hang out and wait and then go at the right time. I think the other challenge that we also had in terms of conceding centre bounce scores was that our defenders, particularly those deeper defenders, are also horribly out of form at the moment and lacking confidence. I think Saad El-Hawli is probably the exception. So when the ball came in from a centre clearance, they're reactive, they're back shoulder rather than being proactive. They're getting led to the footy, and in a 6-6-6 environment, Brisbane were able to get space pretty easily and get a leg up on our defenders, and it just made it all too easy for them.
Yeah. You touched on him early in Peter Wright, and he had another excellent game, particularly around the ground. Maybe not so much as in the ruck contests, particularly at centre bounce, but certainly his ability to be an option around the ground, get back and help the defence, and also go forward and kick goals was very, very impressive. And I think it's been one of the shining lights of the year so far. But I think what it has also done, this is partly due to the fact that our other ruck options have been out, is that we're sort of carrying Blackerson as a primary defender and then coming up as that second ruck option. It doesn't feel like a natural way to play your second ruck. I feel like it's made us too tall in the back line these past few weeks. It's really hurting our ability to get the ball out of there effectively when it goes in there.
Yeah, look, I don't like a ruckman rotating back. I think it's a big ask. I think as a forward, it works because you really only have to worry about playing at the ball then, but down back you're having to worry about stopping an opponent. Forwards are rotating, so you can have 2 or 3 different opponents throughout the game. You have to understand the way that they move and adjust to the way the ball is coming in. Then you've got to switch your mind to being in the ruck and playing a 360 role. I think it's a lot for a player to take on, let alone a player who's only played a handful of games at senior level, sort of 15 games or so. But I think ultimately the bigger problem too was how we won the ball back. We had 23 intercepts in our defensive 50, but only 6 marks. So when we did win it back, it was under pressure. And then, when we did get an intercept mark, Brisbane took our switch away. So we just weren't able to control the ball once we did have it and have some calm ball movement out of there. That resulted in what we were talking about earlier with us giving up the footy a fair bit.
Yeah, you sort of talked about how Brisbane didn't allow us any easy ball, or those kicks to sort of take the pressure off and sort of start to switch and move the opposition zone. I guess thinking about the other way, you're coming up against a team like Brisbane, which I think you have to be able to challenge their contested ball movement, otherwise they'll just pull you apart, and we just couldn't do that. Our pressure rating for the day was 148, which was the lowest of any club this season. We only had 40 tackles for the game, which is our lowest number for the season. And part of that has to do with the way the Lions play. They keep they play the kick mark game. They keep the ball away from those contested situations where you can build pressure, where you can lay tackles. So that helps explain to an extent why those numbers are. Once the Lions got the ball on the outside, we just couldn't generate any pressure on them to really make it difficult for them to move the ball. And whilst part of that is certainly down to the coaching, the other part is simply the team has not played long enough together to bed down a structure or know where best to run or to leave their man to impact a contest. It's a bit of a catch-22 situation. I guess we're not skilled enough to be able to go man on man or really, really shut it down. Other teams outskill us. But we also don't have the positioning to be able to shut down, sides that have really well-controlled ball movement like the Lions.
Yeah, I mean, in the first half, there were some moments in the game where we were getting that. We were able to get some territory and then get some forward half pressure. We had 10 intercepts in the forward half of midfield in the first half, which wasn't too bad an outcome. We just weren't really able to capitalise in terms of score and put that on the board, or when we did, we put the ball back in a position where we were vulnerable, and that's a centre bounce. Yeah, I think there were moments, but we weren't able to withstand that for long enough. I will say the Lions, take my Essendon hat off for a moment and just sit back and watch the Lions go about their work. They're the best team in the comp. Well, they're the best team in the comp, full stop. But they're the best at using the stand rule to their advantage. Their ability, if they don't like something around the ground, they'll just come up and get a short hit up, basically right next to the man on the mark, knowing that the man on the mark can't move. And yeah, they'll just take that again and again and again until they can get the ball into a part of the ground where they're happy to then go faster. And I think I mentioned earlier, it looked to me that we stripped the game back to basics. And to me, it looked like we went largely man on man. We had a half forward going up, as did they, but largely around the ground, it was man on man rather than zone. And that makes sense, but I think it does make it harder to stop their uncontested game because it means you're then relying on one-on-one and being able to beat a player to the ball in order to get a spoil in or to intercept rather than, concentrating numbers to where Brisbane might be trying to move it. And it kind of played in their hands. I think in our case, we were just trying to, or our coach's case, they were just trying to simplify the game against a really good team.
Yeah. Moving on to some of the other good performers for the Bombers, and after a couple of weeks playing almost exclusively at half forward, Sam Durham went back into the midfield and had one of his better games with 27 disposals, 9 clearances, and 8 score involvements. And it felt like early in the game, in that first quarter, he was sort of the only Essendon player that was really at the level that he could challenge the Brisbane mids. Brisbane probably had, 5 of the 6 best midfielders on the ground in terms of performance in that first quarter. Sam was the only one that was really taking it up to them. I know you've been big on Sam being a better half forward than a midfielder. Does a game like that make you reconsider that thought?
No, I think it's the old El Paso ad, mate. I think why not have both? I don't think he has to be one or the other. I think it's about putting him in a position where he can play his best footy. And I think what we did well for a lot of the time that he was in the centre bounce last week was we had him in that defensive sweeper role, which means that he could also go forward through the stoppage and use his explosive attributes when he did have an opportunity to win the ball, but also defend. So I'm more than happy to see him rotate through there. I like him at half forward as well because I think he can do some real damage in that position. I don't think it needs to, nor should it be one or the other. And I think especially with Roby, who's showing quite similar attributes, you've got 2 guys there who I would hope can be rotated through and have the best of both worlds.
Yeah. And then Nate Caddy, apart from his conversion, and part of that is where he's being forced to take his kicks from at the moment. His work rate and his ability to generate a shot is off the charts right now. He's had more scoring shots than, or at least up until the Suns played last against our upcoming opponents, the Giants. He basically had as many scoring shots as the Coleman leader in Ben King. Now, Ben King's been a lot more accurate, but in a forward line that's not getting a lot of service, it just shows you how hard he was working, again, up against the best side in the comp. And I think it's been noticeable from Nate Caddy that a lot of the times he's actually performed better against the best sides or on the big occasions like Anzac Day, which is a really good sign for the future. So again, we'd be in a lot of trouble if we didn't have him. And then, of course, his comments after the game where he expressed dissatisfaction with losing and not really wanting to dwell on positive moments. He wants to get the result. Obviously, led to more media reports about the potential of him wanting out or him leaving, and certainly gave the talking heads on TV a lot of fodder to cover. Any concerns from you with him leaving?
No, not at all. I love the comments, mate. I thought they were brilliant. As soon as I heard it, my first instinct was that I really enjoyed it. My second was this is going to blow up and become a story. But yeah, no concerns for me. I think this young group are really, really united in wanting to take the club forward. I think we're not breaking new ground here. It's things we've said before, but I think we've probably got another draft or two to truly turn the rest of the list over. The benefit of by the time we've done that is Nate Caddy and Archie Roberts and these guys will start to be at sort of 60 games and be heading into their prime years. Yeah, I think he's a real leader of the football club already and going to be a big part of our future.
Yeah. The actual match itself, though, was overshadowed by the leak of the Brisbane Lions pre-match whiteboard covering their ideas of what the strengths and weaknesses of the Essendon players were. I think for the most part, it was fairly overblown in the end. It was like, I think the media sort of found like they discovered the Holy Grail or something like that. I think the vast majority of things that were on that whiteboard were pretty obvious or pretty tame. There were a couple of questionable things. I guess, if you're an individual there and you're actually getting an insight into what other people think of you and the best team thinks of you. So hopefully the Essendon players haven't necessarily taken it as a bad thing. Hopefully they've taken it as a learning opportunity and allow them to reflect on how they perceive their performance compared to how others perceive their performance and how they can bridge the gap to get to where they want to be. I guess there's that. And then I guess, in your own time at the club, you were there for over a decade. I'm sure there were some secret things that might have leaked at some stage. Any stories from back then?
Look, opposition analysis is a key part of preparation for a match. I think most of what was seen was pretty standard stuff. I don't recall any specific leaks. I remember an incident when we were playing Freo. This was back when we were still at Windy Hill, and we thought that the Freo opposition scouts might have been peering in through the back of Windy Hill through sitting in a renter car and using binoculars. And one of the assistant coach, I might not name him, but was particularly paranoid and sent some people over to try and get them away. And it turned out that it was undercover cops who were sort of staking out a house, and not sure exactly what the situation was, but yeah, there is a fair bit of paranoia around clubs trying to keep things in-house for lots of reasons. But yeah, I think what was on there was very standard stuff. And back in my day, we would feature that kind of stuff in a handout for the players, leading into a game, and then elements of it would also go up on the whiteboard in the coach's room. So yeah, look, I found it interesting to see what they thought of our players. I think Brad Scott would have really enjoyed it too. I think it's a great coaching tool for him, particularly around some of the younger players, to say, hey, this is what they think you need to work on, and then also a bit of a slap in the face for some of the older players. I'm curious to see this week how Langford and Merritt were labelled as selfish. How do they respond? I think that's going to be a really interesting one. I think the only thing for me, I didn't like the Jackson Pryor one. I think if you consider what was written there was to be used to take a tactical advantage, and that's the intent behind it, which it is, then I don't think a player's partner is fair game in that. And I know Chris Fagan was on the front foot suggesting that it was an in-joke and that Jackson was okay with it. But I think if you hear Hugh McCluggage's comments during the week, it probably suggests that maybe Jackson didn't quite take it quite as well as Chris Fagan made out. I do think that's poor. I think players' partners and family members are out of bounds. And this is also a club that, had their captain at the time a few years ago sledge an opposition player about their mother, who I think might have passed away or was quite unwell. They've had a couple of off-field situations with player partners, and things happen there. And then on the weekend, they had a VFL player use a homophobic slur. And I think that potentially paints a bit of a picture about, what they think and the respect that they give out to other people. So, yeah, I didn't like that part, but the on-field stuff I thought was fair game and quite interesting.
Yes, and it certainly was, and I think it inspired a lot of comedy, including from yours truly, where I managed to make good use of my time by putting together my own whiteboard as some of our favourite media members. I think I was pretty tame with what I said. I sort of held back a little bit, but it certainly got quite a strong response, including from some of the people on the whiteboard itself who liked the post, and it certainly went around the internet there, even went on Reddit. But it does bring us on to our Barrett Award nominee for this week, and has taken up until round 9, but the man himself has got his first nomination for the award that's named for him. This is specifically through his response to the Bronx cheering or booing of Ben McKay that took place in the weekend, specifically saying how much he hated hearing it. And look, this is after people like him have spent weeks highlighting every mistake Ben has made, talking him down, constantly bringing up his contract, and blaming him for everything wrong with Essendon defensively. And he has the audacity to stand there as some sort of hide-minded arbiter of what is acceptable and what is not. I described it as a arsonist complaint, the building was on fire. It's really frustrating how holy they're now some of these people in the media are, including Damien Barrett himself, the way in which he talks about incidents as if he has had nothing to do with creating the situation that is the result of the incident. I've been pleased to see that we spoke about the way in which people have been talking about Ben McKay last week. I've seen that other members of the Essendon fandom have also taken a stand as well, because the way people have been attacking Ben, both online and in the media, has gone too far. But for someone like Barrett to talk like he did was absolutely infuriating, and sees him get a well-deserved nomination for his own award.
Yeah, it was pretty pathetic coverage, mate. I reckon if you're going to go at the fans, which, I think is largely justified, then I think you should go your own colleagues and hold them to account as well. And there was some fellow panellists that he was alongside that were most definitely guilty in playing a role in what happened. And, when things aren't going well, there's a section of the fan base, and not that this isn't criticism of the fan base, mind you, this is the role that the media plays and what they're trying to do. that hang on the commentary that's shown, and when they're cherry picking moments in a game of football and not showing things in totality or explaining them as a whole, then fans build a perception of the player that it is more than often unfair and unjustified. And then what we see is what happened on the weekend, which people will have different views. I'm not a big fan of it at all. But yeah, I think if you're going to call out the fans, then call out your colleagues for playing a big role in what happened.
Yeah. Well, Jono, maybe we need a second nomination this week after Tom Morris's report the other night about the metrics that Brad Scott is on to keep his job. Tom Morris is clearly barracking for this story to result in a coach sacking, because the way in which the story was presented was pretty disingenuous. It wasn't really anything new to those who had read the president's interviews in the past few weeks, and essentially boils down to man has to meet key performance indicators to keep his job. But look, I guess when you're part of the old boys private school club like old mate Tom is, that sort of thing is a foreign concept.
Yeah, I mean, far out, mate. It firstly claims as an exclusive, but he's just ripped something off that was in a print article a number of weeks ago in both the main papers in Melbourne, The Sun and The Age. So it wasn't new news. It certainly wasn't exclusive. He then claimed pressure acts as one of the key metrics, which I find awfully hard to believe in the first place. But on the next graphic, he showed our rankings that were supposedly meant to be against the key metrics that were going to determine whether Brad Scott would keep his job or not, but left pressure acts out, which I can only assume is because, we're going okay in that regard, where we rank 10th in the AFL. We're above the AFL average in pressure acts. So it probably didn't help his story, but instead showed results exclusively where we're ranked 18th, even though it was in some areas that weren't on his initial list of key metrics. It was pretty horrendous reporting, very, very disingenuous. And then I think you can throw Jay Clark in too, mate, if we can give a triple nomination this week, given we're on a bit of a roll. He reported in September last year that Jayden Laverde had joined Zach Merritt and Jordan Ridley in forming an exodus and wanting out of Essendon. And then today he reports Jayden's new 2-year deal at the Giants, which is great news for him, but changes the story to Essendon booting him out of the club to try and make it look like Essendon had made another mistake in getting rid of someone and that has gone on to play good footy elsewhere. So talk about twisting facts to suit an agenda.
Yes, it's quite infuriating, and I think we could probably spend all night talking about the ways in which the media has infuriated us this year, but I think it is time to move on, and unfortunately to more mixed news on the injury front. I think we've touched on him quite a lot over the last couple of weeks because we're being really impressed with the way in which he's developed. But I think we were both really sad to see Saad El-Hawli go down with a collarbone injury. He was someone who's really starting to settle at senior level. After last year, it seemed to be questionable whether we were able to make it, or at least in my view. I think the way in which he has improved his game and improved the aspects of the game that he really needed to work on was really impressive. And it's a shame he's not going to be able to continue to do that at AFL level for a period of time. Bad news for Reece Unwood as well. He suffered a bad hamstring strain in the VFL and will be out for close to 2 months. And then Brayden Fiorini has gone into back surgery that will see him out for most of the year. There are some suggestions he could get back for the last few games of the year, but at this point, it might be worth putting him on ice and opening up a mid-season draft spot to get another look at talent. And we should have a pretty high pick in the mid-season draft. I guess we've still got a little bit of time before we have to make that call or whether we put him out for the season, get a sense of how his recovery from his back injury would go, because I'm sure that he would want to get out there on the field. He's come over as he's not a high-profile player, but in terms of where our list is, he's come over as a senior player. He's straight into the leadership group. He most certainly would want to be out there, but I guess we sort of wait and see his recovery, and if it's, unless he's going to get back for a decent amount of games, it's probably better for the club in the long term. He goes on the long-term injury list, and we get a chance to look at another talent that could help the club going forward.
Yeah, look, I suspect that we'll use the next few weeks to scout the market for what's available and then make a decision from there. A real shame for Saadi. I think he's come a long way over the last few weeks and hopefully comes back with the confidence that he had on the weekend. I think that's the worry with an injury like that is how quickly you can get back to the confidence under physical contact and physical pressure. Shame for Reece too. He's out of contract, would want to be making every post a winner to stay on the list. It sounds like it's a bad hammy, and with Kako out already, there might have been a chance for him to get some senior footy. So, yeah, shame for both of those lads.
Yes, but I guess in some better news, Vigo Vicentini and Harry Jones are going to be both returning to play in the VFL this week after their injuries. I think especially with our ruck issues, it's going to be great to see Vigo back out there especially so that, again, with someone who I think we have high hopes for, I can continue his development.
Yeah, exactly. I think both Figo and Harry, let's hope they can get back to playing some good footy and just keep asking questions of the guys that are in the seniors. It's ultimately what we want out of the guys playing VFL.
Yeah. All right, let's turn our attention to our opponents this week in the GWS Giants, or maybe soon to be not the GWS Giants, some other form of Giants, but it's not really here or there. They finished last year in 5th place after the regular season, but then lost their elimination final at home to the Hawks. They started this year strongly, getting revenge on Hawthorn in opening round before going on to lose their next 3 games. They bounced back with a big win against the Tigers at Gather Round before going loss in the next 3 games. Currently, they sit in 14th spot with 3 wins and 5 losses with a percentage of 88.2.
Yeah, they've got a pretty extensive injury list at the moment, mate. Tom Green is out for the year, which most people know. Josh Kelly has been missing and not sure when they'll get him back yet. Sam Taylor, Darcy Jones are also out. So, 4 of their very, very, very best players are out. Nick Madden was showing some promising signs in the ruck as well. He's likely out for a couple of months. So I guess it's probably not a surprise that they've struggled for consistency. You take, 4 or 5 of the best players out of any side, and it's going to be a challenge. So, no surprise at all.
Turning to some of their numbers, last year the Giants averaged 91.75 points per game, which was ranked 5th in the comp, whilst giving up 81, which made them the 9th best defence. So far this year, they're averaging 8 points per game less and giving up 14 points per game more, which, given their outs, you can understand where that's coming from. Whilst last year the Giants were giving up 4.13 more inside 50s to their opponents per game, they were a team that was comfortable. No team likes to play from behind, but they were a team that was more comfortable than most, sort of absorbing pressure from their opponents and then slingshotting forward. This year, they've actually improved that to break even, although their 57 inside 50s against per game are the 3rd highest in the comps. Giants games this year so far have recently sort of been ping-ponging back and forth through the 50s because they're generating a lot of inside 50s in their games. Have increased their forward 50 entries over last year. Their efficiency has dropped away. They've gone from 51 to 49%, and their opposition's efficiency going inside has increased slightly to 48%. And they've gone really handball heavy this year. They've dropped from 1.4 kicks per handball last year to 1.23 this season. It's partly due to the personnel that they've got, but they're probably also trying to shift their game plan as well. It's probably hard to constantly be playing so far from your back half and trying to get a little bit more balance in their ball movement and their position on the ground.
Yeah, they're ranked 13th in the AFL for scores for scoring 2 points a game better than us. We're ranked 15th. So they're not, at the moment, at least getting it done on the scoreboard, doing better than us, 21 points a game better than us points against, but still ranked 12th versus us in 17th. They're 9th in the AFL for inside 50 differential. It's their own inside 50s ranked 7th that are propping that up. They're ranked 16th for inside 50s against. So they're conceding ball in there. And then not only is their inside 50 efficiency down, their ball retention is too. They're ranked 16th in the AFL for ball retention when it's going inside 50, 5th in the AFL last year. So that's been a big shift for them. And then they're ranked 12th for marks inside 50, but they're the number 2 ranked team in the competition for forward 50 ground balls behind only Hawthorns. The damage that they are able to do inside 50 is largely coming through ground ball rather than aerial.
Yeah. Whilst last year the Giants struggled at centre clearance, they ranked 14th with minus 1.4 per game. That's dropped even further this year. They're down at minus 4 per game, 17th ranked centre clearance side, and giving up 2 more points per game from this source. So they're really struggling from the centre clearance. You can understand that a bit with Tom Green going out, their best centre clearance player. Even bringing in Clayton Oliver hasn't arrested that slide. The stoppage game, though, has improved slightly, going from minus 0.63 to plus 0.13 per game, and they're mid-table in scores from clearance. Outside the clearance, the Giants have improved strongly in the contested aspects of their game, going from 14th to 5th in contested possession differential, only a plus 5.13 per game. And then they're the number 1 ground ball side in the comp. They're going at plus 13 ground ball gets per game. So when the game gets into a bit of a scrap, they seem to be doing quite well. There's just other aspects of the game that are really falling down at the moment.
Yeah, they average 31.8 points a game from clearance, mate, which is a combination of centre clearance and stoppage clearance. It's ranked 12th in the AFL. We're ranked 13th. They're ranked 14th for scores on turnover. We're ranked 16th. So not really much separating the sides there. We're ninth at conceding scores. Sorry, they're ninth at conceding scores from clearance. We're 15th, conceding 8 points more per game. But in our case, most of that is coming from centre bounce, which the Giants haven't been all that impactful at being able to do all that much damage from that source. So, yeah, it's an interesting game to how these two sides match up at the moment. There's not an obvious area. Stronger behind the footy, I think, than us. Better at ground level in their forward line than us, but through the midfield, probably relatively even at the moment.
Yeah. Finally, in terms of their stats, last year the Giants are one of the best marking sides in the comp. They rank second for differential with plus 12 per game. It's dropped this year so far to -3, and this is mostly down to them giving up 16 more marks to their opponents per game than they were last year. The amount of marks that they're taking is fairly similar. The marks inside 50 are also similar to last year, both for and against, but they've also improved the intercept differential from break even to plus 1.38 per game. But their scoring from the source has actually dropped, even though they're winning more intercepts compared to their opponents. They're down 3 points on scores from intercept this year compared to last year.
Yeah, they're ranked 14th for scores against on turnover. We're ranked 17th. So again, I mean, we've had a couple of games that have really blown out in that area, but also had some games where we've proven that we can do quite well. You know, the game against the Dogs, we were pretty strong in. I think we outscored the Ds and the Suns in turnover scores from memory as well. So again, which version of Essendon do you get? Which version of the Giants do you get is the big question going into this game. But let's have a quick look, mate. It's, you know, we're 7 games into the season, so most people are probably familiar with the list changes that the Giants have made. But let's have a quick look.
Yeah, you say quick look, and it's going to probably be the quickest look of the season for us because the Giants made the equal fewest list changes of any club in the off-season with only 5. Inaugural club captain Callum Ward retired after an ACL injury kept him to only 12 games last year. And then Lachlan Keefe somehow lasted 17 seasons in the AFL and finally retired, having played 3 games. Jacob Weir left as a free agent to Port after 14 games in 2025. Wade Dirksen and Josh Fahey were delisted without having played a game last year. Giants then had a high-profile in former premiership demon Clayton Oliver, who's played all games so far this year, as well as someone we touched on earlier and someone familiar to Essendon fans in Jayden Laverty, who was picked up as an SSP selection. He's also played every game and as you mentioned earlier, received a 2-year contract. Neither of their 2 draftees, Oscar Taylor and Finnegan Davis, or new Cat B rookie Riley Hamilton have featured yet this year.
Yeah, I think the biggest loss, mate, is you actually missed there. They lost their social media guru in Jacob Gaynor. He's gone across to Tassie, so that was a big move. But yeah, you touched on Jayden getting the 2-year extension, which is great news for him. I think he was a underappreciated, undervalued warrior for our football club, and I'm glad to see that he's playing good footy at the Giants. Hopefully not this week. Clayton Oliver has been their number 2 ranked player this season, behind only Brett Daniels, just ahead of Finn Callahan and Lockie Ash. So I think with Tom Green missing, they obviously would have been hoping to pair those 2 up, but more so with him missing, he's been really important with them, or really important for them, I should say.
Yes, and look, on to selection for this week, and Essendon has made 6 changes, 2 of them forced, with El-Hawli and Caldwell injured. Caldwell apparently was sort of line ball to play, but I am glad that they did rest him. I don't think there's any point really trying to push anyone through at this stage of the year. And we also had players who we could bring in to cover him. And then 4 omissions, including Ben McKay, Tom Edwards, Condigianis, and Jade Gresham. Ins include Nick Bryan for his first senior game of the year, coming off his ACL. So fantastic for him to finally get back to senior level. Darcy Parish comes in after being rested. Mason Redmond comes back in after his injury, as well as May, who missed last week. And then Archie Perkins and Zach Johnson have been rewarded for form in the VFL. We'll note, as well as it being our 100th game, it is Sam Durham's 100th game, so great milestone for him coming off the mid-season draft. But obviously some big changes this week. The headline story is Ben McKay, after everything that's been said about him. I think we're fortunate that when we get onto the Giants, that Jesse Hogan is out. I think if there was a sense that Hogan would have played, I wonder whether McKay would have been kept in. But I think giving him an opportunity to go back down to the VFL, although we haven't seen the VFL side yet to see if he is named or if he's going to be given some time off to rest, will be good for him. Hopefully we can get him back to his best. I mean, I'm disappointed with the Edwards omission. And I think that's partly because we've sort of pushed him around the last couple of weeks up the ground. But I am excited to see Archie May back, given what we've seen from him so far this year. It's great to get Redmond back as another senior body in that back line that really needs it. We obviously, we've talked about how we've looked since Jordan Ridley's gone back out of the side. But I think also people have forgotten we haven't had Mason Redman back there and his experience for quite some time. So hopefully that helps settle the back line there. Excited to see Zach Johnson get another go. And Archie Perkins is an interesting one. He's been playing midfield in the senior side. I wonder if he will go in as a bigger body mid to help out there, or whether he'll play forward. It'll be interesting to see there. I am worried a little bit that we are well stocked for medium to tall forwards, but friend of the show, Rick Edwards, noted that Langford was with the backs at training this week. Even though Langford, I think, is named at full forward in the side, we know that doesn't really mean all that much. So I think Langford sort of playing as a back, or whether that's further up on the wing, probably solves that issue of having too many talls in the forward line.
Yeah, I think firstly, Sam Durham, I mean, to get picked up in the mid-season draft and then go on and forge a good career so far, to get to a 100-game milestone is an incredible achievement. He's obviously got a lot of footy ahead of him. And again, like Nate Caddy is a big part of our future going forward. He's only the third player behind John Noble and John Newcomb out of the current version of the mid-season draft to hit that 100-game milestone. So, yeah, huge achievement to him and good luck. You and I have been pretty dirty on selection the last couple of weeks. To me, actually, I mean, I don't ever really like seeing that many changes, but to me, it actually makes perfect sense for the first time in a while. I think, Redmond and Parrish are like for like with El-Hawli and Caldwell, so those two make sense. I think McKay slides out and Blackiston goes back, and then Blackiston and Reid get the Cadman and Grzewski matchups. I think this is a change that has been, or changes that have been forced or made to really set up a ruck advantage. And we'll touch on it when we get stuck into the preview. But the Giants do have a bit of a ruck weakness at the moment. We need to find out where Brian's at and what he's capable of to make some list management decisions going forward. I know he has a contract for 2027, but ultimately we probably want to decide before that, whether he's our man or we need to start looking at other targets. But I think that change makes perfect sense for me, because let's try and take advantage of their weakness. Peter Wright, other than the game against Collingwood, has been in good form in the ruck head going forward, so I think he helps us out there. The other advantage I guess the side effect of that means that also bringing May back, who deserved his spot as well and has done a good job playing that anchor forward. It does mean that Edwards slides out, and that's a bit unfortunate, but I don't think a forward line of Wright, Edwards, May and Caddy was going to work, and that's what you want. Ultimately, you want players in form who are missing out. And I think Perkins just gives us a bit of extra ground ball cover over Edwards, plus has the advantage of being able to play deep forward out of the goal square and keep structure if Caddy or May are resting or Riders in the ruck, we get to keep that shape ahead of the footy. I do expect that McGrath will go back into the midfield, and that means that Johnson slides to the back line and takes his spot there. I think Langford goes back over Conto as well, and then Cox pushes up to the wing, which also means that hopefully Day Wicks gets back to half forward, and I think we see Merritt more forward again this week. So I thought the team was better balanced last week than it was the week before. I think this is better balanced again than it was last week. Ideally, you would like a couple of extra genuine small forwards in that team, but we really don't have them to pick from at the moment.
Yeah. And then on to the Giants, they've been forced into 4 changes with Jesse Hogan, Lee Kalir, O'Halloran and Angwin all out injured. Ins come Riccardi, McMullen, Hannaford and Grzewski. So a couple of big outs there for the Giants, including obviously Jesse Hogan, and he's torn us apart on occasions in the past. And then Lee Kalir has been playing an important role for them as their second ruck there.
Yeah, I think Jesse Hogan's probably battled a little bit for form this year and probably been playing under duress by the looks of it. O'Halloran and Angwin have been important players for them this year and really hitting their straps. So that adds to a long list of outs. But basically, they've gone like for like, a key forward for a key forward, and then Riccardi will replace Alir as that second ruck. And then the other two are, give them some midfield forward sort of wing rotation players as well.
Yes, going on to look at what the Giants did in their last game. They went up to face the Suns in the Expansion Cup, and the Suns skipped out to an early lead before the Giants pulled them back just before half-time, and they're only down by 4 points at the break. But a 4-2 third quarter gave the Suns the breathing space they needed to run out 20-point winners in the end.
Yeah, the tail of the tape in this game, mate, was turnover scores. The Suns had 10 more intercepts. Intercept marks were 16-5 in the Suns' favour. The Giants only scored 25 points from turnover to the Suns' 61. And then the other thing was the Suns were really able to do damage from forward half chains, from turnover and stoppage. They actually scored 41 points from chains that started. This is the Suns in their own forward 50. So they really did pin the ball in the Giants' defensive 50.
Yeah, you touched on it there. The Giants coughed the ball up 10 more times on intercept or turned it over to 10 more times. And that sort of nullified the advantage they were getting in the contest where they had 8 more stoppage clearances. And the Suns ultimately were able to turn that into territory. They had 9 more inside 50s. And the Giants also struggled to stop the Suns controlling the ball. They gave up 55 more marks across the game to the Suns than they took themselves.
Yeah, the Giants just weren't able to retain territory from clearance. They either scored, and they did okay at that, outscored the Suns by 9 points from clearance. But if they weren't able to score, they just gave it back. And again, back to that intercept game, that was the difference in the match.
Yes, on to individuals. And Clayton Oliver, you've talked about before, he led the way for the Giants with 32 disposals and 9 clearance, whilst Lockie Whitfield had 30 and over 600 metres gained. Kenny Scoffhard and Aaron Cadman were the only multiple goal kickers for the Suns, both kicking 2. Also think it's important to note that, the conditions of the game would have been pretty taxing on the Giants. It was wet and humid up there. They've had the short break and had to travel as well. It'll be interesting to see whether there's much of an impact on them in this game with those things against them.
Yeah, I mean, let's hope so. I think we'll take any advantage we can get at the moment. I know we didn't bounce back all that well from playing in the conditions up there. Neither did the Suns. They went and played Tassie down in Hawthorn after we played them in the real hot conditions of the Gold Coast. So, yeah, let's hope it gives us something of an advantage.
Yes, and I think let's go on to the match tactics now. And I think after the last couple of weeks, I think we really need to start at the source. And the centre bounce has been a real concern over these past couple of weeks. We've given up 71 points directly from centre bounce from these past couple of weeks. And then when we've won it, we've been unable to get a direct advantage. We've only scored 3 points directly from centre clearance over these past couple of weeks. So I guess, can we both find a way to get more dangerous from centre clearance without opening ourselves up the other way even more?
Look, I think this week gives us a potential to do that. Neither team has been particularly strong at clearances. They're -4 differential per game. We're -4.2. It's been a bit of a challenge for both teams. Lockie Ashes did attend 61% of centre bounces last week. It's the 3rd time he's gone into the midfield this year, having not done so since round 10 last year. He's been predominantly a dominant half-back flanker. Adam Kingsley in his press conference today hinted towards Ash staying in the midfield, which I think likely means that Toby Green could stay forward. And he has been playing mostly as a mid this year, but was more forward last week. But the other thing that might change is with O'Halloran out, Green and Coniglio might need to pick up the slack a little bit. Oliver's their number one first possession player. He's averaging 9 a game. Toby Green is averaging 5. Depending on what they do there, if they do move Green out, it does leave a hole at that first possession part of their game. Oliver's their number one clearance player, averaging 7.4. Callaghan is next at 4.3. So Clayton Oliver really does hold a lot of the keys to them being able to get territory. But as I said, when we're talking about selection, they have a ruck challenge, and we haven't come up against too many of them this year. We've been on the receiving end, but Briggs is, not their first choice ruckman at the moment. I think the ruck rules, if they've disadvantaged any ruckman in the comp, it's probably him, which is why they've preferred young Madden. He's won just 38% of his ruck contests this season, and Riccardi, who I assume will be the second ruck, is just 30%. So I think we've selected a team this week really to try and combat a bit of a weakness in the Giants game. We've gone a genuine ruck to complement Brian. And then we've also brought back Darcy Parish, who we know is a good first possession and good clearance player. So I think that all makes sense to me, why we've gone that way. I'd be moving Merritt out of the midfield mix this week. I don't think he was particularly effective there as a defensive role or as a sweeper role. I'd be getting McGrath back in there to give more defensive discipline. Sharp is strong at being able to keep his shape as well. So I think that gives us a bit more of a rounded defensive edge. And then I'm good with keeping Durham rotating through, but just get him to rotate with Roby. Let's not be all of one and none of the other. I think they can both do some real damage this week. I think they're both disciplined, particularly Durham, to hold their shape defensively when the Giants win the footy, but then dangerous the other way and really be able to explode through the front of stoppage. And I'm not sure players like Oliver in particular that offer a hell of a lot when they don't win the footy. So I think we can expose him there. Gives us three big bodies in there with Sharp, Roby and Durham. Gives us some power, gives us some defensive attributes with McGrath in there as well. And then Parrish as the ball winner. I do think it's a better mix if we go that way.
Moving on, I think when I was planning for this show, I was looking at what weapons the Giants had, and they've got two of the best halfbacks in the competition in Lachie Whitfield and Lachie Ash. But as you touched on there, that they've decided with all the outs they've had to move Ash into the midfield probably for the first time. And Lachie Ash is obviously an excellent player, but potentially they're robbing Peter to pay Paul there, because I think it's the sort of having talent on the half-back line for them has served them really well, at least against us in the past. So given they've made that choice, does that make it easier to contain them from half-back than they otherwise would be?
Well, yeah, I think I do expect Ash to play midfield, but just based on the team that they've picked, we have to prepare for both. Fonte is also impressing down back. He's second at the Giants for intercepts and intercept marks and having a good year. So it's not like even without Ash, they lack for options across half back. But I think it seems logical to me to move Cox up on to the wing, give us a little bit of defensive coverage behind the ball. I think Cox's defensive positioning on the wing has been quite good, and then he gives us a down the line or kicking outlet as well, and his ball use is pretty good. The big thing that also does is it allows us to move Day Wicks across half forward again, where I think he's provided a real weapon and spark for us. So if Day Wicks is forward, Newen's there and Merritt's there, all of a sudden we have some real tackling pressure and intent and pressure acts. So whether it's Whitfield and Ash or it's Whitfield and Fonte, I think, again, that mix and having a more agile half forward line is going to help us a lot. And then you throw in Roby and Durham working through there, who we know like to hunt the footy and the opposition. May and Caddy are always up for it as well. I think it was only a couple of weeks ago where May led us for tackles. So, I think, again, it's the changes we have made for me give us the opportunity to firstly give us a ruck advantage where I think we can get it. And then the flow-on effect is we have a better balanced forward line and add midfield because of it.
Yeah, and you touched on Archie May there, and I think with Brian coming in, it allows Wright to play forward, and the Giants don't necessarily have as the tallest of tall defenders at the moment, and obviously with Taylor out, who's probably a top 3 key defender in the league, that they're a bit light on down there for key defenders. So there's potentially the chance that we could take advantage of that. But I think the big thing for us is trying to get more shots in good spots this week. Last week, we were forced out wide too often, having to take low percentage shots. We need to find a way that we can get a lot more easier points on the board than we have been. And also, for the love of God, can we kick a goal and then not give up a goal from the centre bounce? I think I don't know what I'm going to do if I see that again. We bust our ass and get a goal, and then the opposition just runs it straight out and kicks a goal. It's just so deflating.
Yeah, they're second in the AFL for giving up marks in their defensive 50. So it's going to be hard work aerially. They're 13th for giving up ground balls in D50, and they have the 4th most tackles against them in their defensive 50s. I think we want to be able to bring the ball to ground if we're not going to mark it. I think Caddy and May in particular are pretty good at that, particularly when they can get some separation, not necessarily from their opponent, but from one another. We don't want our forwards grouping up. They concede the second most points in the AFL from forward half change. So that's when teams get the footy in their own forward half, they're able to score. So I think the method is pretty simple this week. It's win clearance to win territory, hence the Brian inclusion to give us an advantage in the ruck. Parrish comes back because he can help us in and around clearance and join Durham and Sharp and Roby in and around the footy. McGrath to move in there to give us some defensive application, which means we need Zach Johnson down back. So that all makes sense. And then if we can have those real obsessed defensive players in Merritt, Day Wicks and Newen around our half forward line, then I do think it gives us an opportunity to keep the ball in our half, but we're going to need to be able to convert that into scores to win the game. So I actually expect to see more scoring shots from general play this week, Humi, than I see from marks and set shots. I think that's just going to be the way that we're going to need to play to kick a winning score.
Well, look, on to our final thoughts, and I'm going to put you on the spot here, Jono. We've made it to 100 match previews without covering a final. Will we be able to preview a final before we reach 200 match?
I'm not sure we'll get to 200, mate, if we don't. It'll be a tough burn. Look, I wanted to see this club back playing and winning finals for a long, long time. It's what I grew up and you grew up expecting. You sort of, grew up in following a footy club that if you didn't make a preliminary final, your season was a failure. I want that more than ever because I've met so many wonderful Essendon fans over 100 episodes or 100 previews and got to hear their stories and how they got involved, how they became an Essendon supporter in the first place and sharing the ups and downs with them. So yeah, my God, I can't wait to celebrate that first finals win with them. It's going to be something special and yeah, let's hope it's well before our 200th match preview, mate.
Yes, fingers crossed there. Well, look, that will do us for this week, and you've touched on it a little bit there and earlier in the show, but once again, I just want to give a massive shout out to everyone who listens to this show, whether you've been with us since day one, and I'm pretty sure, Vince, you were one of the earliest listeners. I feel like he was one of the names appearing there, so I feel like he's the first one I can remember. Vince will be listening, or if you're listening to us for the first time, it does mean the world to us that you give us your time and in some cases, even your money to support this show. But we'll keep saying it, but it does blow us away just how big this has gotten. So we cannot thank you enough. Big thanks to you, John, as well, for your efforts this week. Any final words from you?
No, thank you to you too, mate. Just want to shout out to my mum for Mother's Day on Sunday, your mum too, Humi, and of course the mother of your two young ones and all the other mums out there. Yeah, hope you all have a wonderful day. And for the Bombers supporting mums, I hope it's celebrating a win and reading the paper on Sunday with a little bit of joy.
Well said there, mate. That'll do us for this evening. As always, stay safe, everyone, and go Dons.